inspire, and empower. I want to thank you for tuning in and listening in because I want to talk about something that's very important. We are in a place that is very confusing, very uncertain, very volatile. The conditions that we're in right now are taxing emotionally and mentally. And I say that because we don't have a unified voice in regards to the direction that we're going in. Right now, things are so ambiguous. There's so many different directions that this coronavirus episode is taking us to as a country. And that's just the macro part of it. If we look at it from a micro perspective, we have to ask the same question. What about the local level? Then what about the state level? What about the regional level? And then we can go to federal. Then we look at this as a global incident as well. So it's multi-layered. It has so many different dimensions. So what I want to talk about is the elephant in the room, the hot button, so to speak. And it's about reopening America. Reopening America. What does this thing called reopening America look like? First, I want to take a look at where are we now? Where are we now? And to date, over 825,000 cases have been reported and documented in this country. 825,000 so far. We are quickly approaching 1 million cases of coronavirus. My friends, listen, this is not a political diatribe that I'm having. I'm being completely partisan, and I'm trying my best to make sure that I toe that line where fact prevails over fiction. But we are almost 1 million cases away from a quote unquote hoax, where we were told this is going to go away and this is fake news and there's nothing to see here. There's nothing to worry about. And out of the 825 documented cases, and the reason why I say documented is because due to the lack of testing, we really don't have an accurate number of the total number of people infected. So we have this variable that is totally missing from the whole equation. And then we look at over 45,000 people have lost their lives. 45,000, over that 45,000 Americans have lost their lives. Now, while we're in the middle of this, let's be clear. We're just simply talking about those people who have lost their lives to the coronavirus. But think about this from this perspective. Our hospitals are so taxed that people who have diabetes, people who have cancer, people who have sickle cell, people who have rheumatoid arthritis, those people cannot get the care they need because our hospital system is overtaxed. So how many people are losing their lives simply because they can get the treatment that they need? And more than that, we have to look at it from this perspective as well. How many people are losing their lives because they don't have adequate health care? This is so multidimensional. So those who are simply looking at this as a left-right issue, those who are looking at this from some silly partisan perspective, or from some geographical perspective, because now we almost have this north and south thing happening again. And we're looking at this wrong. We have to look at it from a humanitarian perspective. And we are right. We have this is a sad situation. And those of us who know the words of prayer, we have to pray for each and every one of those families. So thank you, Angie Ray. You are right. Thank you for that comment. You are correct. This is such a sad situation. And I think we get so caught up in this issue that we forget the human element. There's a human factor involved in this. So let's take a look at it like this. From the federal, from the state, and from the local response, what is the message? What is our message? Other than the message we're getting from the stat counter on the news of how many infected, how many died, what is the message? Because now we're at a message that it is against the law in certain states to go into a place without a face covering. 2 weeks ago, no face covering was required. So what is the message? What is the unifying message? And this is the time where we should be telling all of our media outlets, can you please get on the same page and stop giving information based on people's political affiliations? Because the coronavirus does not care if you are Republican, does not care if you're Democrat, does not care if you're independent, does not care if you're atheist, does not care if you're Baptist, does not care if you're Buddhist, it does not care if you're Muslim, does not care. And we need to stop doing media outlet journalism based on political affiliation and base affiliation. We need to get to a place where we say, listen, let's all get together and let's look at the greater good of simple, decent, truthful, and honest journalism. Can we just get to some honesty? That's all people want to see. Is just listen. I'll be transparent. I watch CNN for the predominant part, but if Fox News was given honest, or One American News was just given honest without all the partisan stuff, and there are times when I had to turn off CNN because I'm getting tired of hearing the partisan stuff. So we have to get to a place where we just want some honest journalism and some honest feedback and some honest direction. I think that should be the federal, the state, and the local response. And those things should be given to us timely, effectively, truthfully, and as honestly as we can get it. And this is a time where people have to lay aside their bickering, lay aside their political beefs, and say, listen, this country's in trouble because the last time we saw something like this was 100 years ago. And if you want to be a student of history, go find out what happened to this country 100 years ago during the Spanish flu. It wrecked this country. Not only that, it wrecked this country while we were in World War I. And people still did the same things they're doing today. So we have to realize that we need a response that is on the federal, that is on a state, and that is on a local level that speaks to Americans just as Americans, not as Republican Americans, not as Democratic Americans, not as independents, and it's not about grandstanding and making everything sound like a campaign slogan speech. It's not about that, because Americans are dying. Over 22 million people have filed for unemployment. And I am certain that when the employer went to those folks and said, listen, I got to close my store, I got to close my company because of this coronavirus, they didn't say, but you know what, though? All the Republicans or all the Democrats, you can stay. I assure you that everybody who applied for those unemployment benefits will check one of those boxes, and it'll be Republican, Democrat, Independent, none of the above. I assure you. So you're right. This is not about politics. This is a human issue. This is a human issue. And Angie, you are correct. Behind every number, there's a loved one. Behind every stat, we're looking at the numbers rise on the screen, but what we're failing to realize is that there's grief behind every single number. So to the point where people cannot even hold funerals. So even our customary way of grieving has been impacted. So we have to look at this from a human perspective. We have to look at this from an empathetic lens. And as I look at that, let me just segue. I want to segue into this element of this dynamic that I see happening around the country right now. I just want to show you this. There are many protests around the country. You look around, first of all, if you tell somebody to liberate something, that means to set something free. Patrick Henry, during the American Revolution, said, "Give me liberty or give me death." Those were Patrick Henry's words. Patrick Henry, albeit while there were enslaved people in his country, but I digress, he said he'd rather die than live in a place where freedom was not his. So now that you have the person in the highest office with millions of people hanging on your every word, and you allude to the Second Amendment, which is the right to bear arms, and you say, go liberate this place, you are essentially forming a militia. A militia has now been formed. Now, how do I know a militia has been formed? Because these protests have now taken an eerily familiar tone. An eerily familiar tone. Because not only do you have people showing up, and some, they just simply want the right to work. I understand that. People lost their livelihoods. People trying to feed their families. People don't know where their next meal coming from. They don't know how to pay their rent or mortgage. They have prescriptions that they have to pay for. They have children to take care of. Now that I understand. But what I understand that should be taking place is you saying, can we please hear from our legislators, or can we hear from our elected officials a plan? And once you give us the plan, we'll follow the plan. Now, the White House put out a 6-point plan for reopening. It was the White House plan. 6 points or 6 rationales that should take place. And one of them was a decrease in the number of affected. But once you ignore that plan and say, just go free something, you're speaking to people who are desperate. And people who are desperate, I heard this said, desperate people do dangerous things. Desperate people do dangerous things. So now we have a militia formed, and this is an armed militia. Because now you have people that's showing up with AR-15s. They're showing up to the governor's house in Virginia and Ohio. They're showing up to all these places with machine guns, pretty much. Armed. Why are you armed? Why are you showing up to courthouses and state capitol buildings armed? Secondly, and I saw it today, it happened in Ohio, they went into the state capitol armed. Well, first and foremost, let me say this. I know that at a lot of protests, let me just say, for example, Black Lives Matter. Normally, when I see Black Lives Matter and I see them protesting, there's usually a police presence. I don't know who they're protecting. Maybe they don't know, but they're there. They're there. At Charlottesville, I saw police presence. I saw it. Where's the police presence at these protests? That you're not preventing people from going into a state capitol building armed to the teeth. Armed and dangerous. And if the law of the land says that you can't be out or in certain buildings without a face covering, Why are you just allowed to just be mingling in a gathering of hundreds of people with no face covering? There's something eerily familiar about this tone. And also, my question is, why in the world are Confederate flags there? You have to ask yourself these questions, because when people get desperate, people become tribal. They go to that place of familiarity, and they go to that for comfort. They go to that for relief. They go to that for allegiance. And here we are. We're seeing the ugly underbelly of our society at times that are crucial. So we have to learn from our past. We have to learn from our past. We have to realize that this is not new. We were given a blueprint for this. The Spanish flu in 1918 gave us the blueprint. It showed us what happens when we follow the guidelines, and then it shows what happens when we act out of the epitome of our arrogance. It shows us what happens. And thank you, Angie. You're right. That's a whole other conversation, because the Spanish flu originated in the United States, right here in the good old U.S. Didn't originate in Spanish. The Spanish just was the first ones who wrote about it. Swine flu, right in the farmland in the United States. But that's a whole other thing. We have to learn from our past, people. We have to learn. One thing that I saw, the Great Depression kicked off in the 20s. So you have World War I, you have Spanish flu. And then guess what happened right after the Spanish flu? So, and I want to show you this because we're so concerned about our economy. Go to your history books, go to Google and look up the Roaring 20s. The economy was at its best in the 20s. The economy was booming. It was booming so much they called it the Roaring 20s. It was an awesome time in America financially. I'm not going to say culturally, because that's a whole other story, but we'll talk about that some other time too. But financially speaking, in terms of Wall Street, the Roaring 20s were a time of plenty in this country. Why am I bringing that up? Because we're so focused on the economy. The Spanish flu wiped out hundreds of thousands of lives, but yet the economy rebounded. I'm trying to say we need to focus more on the human aspect and less on this economy, because the economies rise and economies fall. We will find a way for this economy to respond. It will respond once we respond accordingly. Once we get back to work and are safe to get back to work. Once our stores and our restaurants and our businesses open up, because it's safe to open up, the economy will restore itself. So that'll be taken care of. That will be fine. So we have to look at this from the larger perspective. What are we really sacrificing? Because if you look at what we are really sacrificing, we're sacrificing for the greater good. And we can't just jump out there, because this economy and this capitalism is so familiar to us. That's why we have clean banks and dirty schools, because we prize money over humanity. Ask yourself this question. Have you ever gone to a bank that was filthy? Have you ever gone to a bank, broken windows, trash on the floor, graffiti on the inside of it, unkempt? Have you ever gone to a bank that was filthy? Nope. I assure you haven't. Now ask this question. Have you ever seen a school that was filthy? Have you ever been in a school that was just dirty and unkempt. Yes, absolutely. We can't just jump out of here because we're so accustomed to this thing called capitalism that we're going to lose our humanity as we reopen. Because we want to be our best selves when we come out of this. And Angie, you're correct. If the highest office in the land can send out messages saying to liberate places, can't the highest office in the land ask for peace and patience? Absolutely. Absolutely. What do we value? What do we value? We say we value our military. Right now, there are 26 Navy ships that have been put in holding pattern because of instances of coronavirus on the ships. But we say we're patriots. We say we're patriots. But we send young men and young ladies off to war to give their lives and their limbs, yet we don't want to sacrifice to stand in the house, just stand home. It seems nonsensical that we are at a place where we're so worried about getting our hair and nails done that we are willing to risk the lives of those who are vulnerable. I'm hearing people saying, listen, the people who are going to get sick, they're going to get sick anyway. That's called social Darwinism, people. If anybody doesn't know what that means, social Darwinism is survival of the fittest. That's what social Darwinism is. Oh, that only the strong survive. But we don't have time for social Darwinism. We don't have time for letting our most vulnerable be used as lab rats and guinea pigs in this great experiment called capitalism. We don't. We do not. We need to be our best selves. And we need to be wise. We need to be patient. And we need to be cautious. Because the greatest asset that any country has is the well-being of its citizens. The greatest asset that any country has is the well-being of its citizens. What do you guys think? I would love to hear your feedback and your opinions. I would love to hear what you think. But isn't a life worth it? To just let me move away from you temporarily so that I can love you long term. That's what we're asked. That's what's being asked of us. It's almost like I heard, if you love something, set it free. If it comes back, it was meant to be. Aunt who just turned 98. My aunt Jeanette just turned 98. And if I just went to her house and without regard for where I've been or what I was touching or who I was around and said, I'm just going to go see Aunt Jeanette and just went to the house, that means I can't say I love you because I'm putting your life in jeopardy, Aunt Jeanette. So we have to realize that there's a bigger picture. There's a bigger picture. And as I close, I just want us to be more macro-minded and less micro-minded. Let's be people of the bigger picture. And although temporarily this hurts, to not be able to move as we please and see people as we please and give hugs or shake hands and high fives, because we're innately social creatures. But the smart and wise thing to do is to be creatures of longevity, to move and act as though we want to be here for the long haul, and to respect nature. Because if we disrespect nature, the virus shows us what happens. Be careful out there, my friends. Be good to each other and be good to yourself. Have a wonderful, great night. I'm Dr. John Gray, and this is Honest Expressions. Take care. Have a wonderful night.